Now, I often use a bit of a baby analogy, and I know you do too. But so mine always goes that when a baby pops out, right? Okay,
Hmm.
putting their parents to one side, right? If you and I
Yeah,
were brought 10 newborn babies, like it's
yeah,
immediately obvious that no one could be any better or any worse than any of the other, and they're perfect as they are, right? And
yeah,
and so that just that isness of them, the fact
yes,
that they just because they exist. So there,
correct.
can you just then explain to me how you understand how we go from that place where we're
Yeah,
entirely unself-conscious, we'll soil ourselves in polite company without
yeah.
without taking a breath. How we go from that to then starting to create these, I think they've been called like guiding fictions, these stories about
Yeah,
ourselves. We are unlovable, we are unlikable, we are whatever they may be, core shame.
yeah.
What is that process? How would you explain it?
Um, well, the first thing I want to address, there's two things, right? So nothing wrong with soiling yourself, first of all. Let's get that out
Right.
of the way. Because that's going to happen to the best of us as we get older. um, but yes, for a baby, there's definitely no concern about it. Like, God bless
Yeah.
them. Um, and it's subtle, but I think, because you're obviously articulate and you understand the I don't want to say precision, but the impeccability of my work as it relates to language. So you said, there's these 10 babies and they're perfect. So I would just get rid of that. I would lean more into the isness, that they are there.
Yeah.
Because perfectionism and the language of perfect is a subjective experience. There's no such thing without a viewer, without the observer. So there's 10 babies. So then we get into the nature and the nurture conversation. So, as far as I'm concerned, because you're asking me, and it's my assertion, it's not like it's a fact, there's a couple of things that happen. From the spiritual perspective, my assertion and the way I look at it is that each of those babies, even though they may look very similar in terms of size and appearance, and they can't drive, heavy vehicles and make, gourmet dinners, and, but nonetheless, they do carry with them certain codes that we could argue, without getting a little too esoteric, are from, whether you call it previous lives or their incarnation, that they're here to reconcile. So whilst one baby might struggle with self-value that we can't see currently because they don't even know their name, let alone their nationality or religion, or the fact that they're not very good at, geography or something, another baby might struggle with a sense of intimacy because they don't feel that they're lovable. But that baby, may have a sense of confidence about who they are and the way that they can perform, but they don't feel connected to others. Conversely, the first one that doesn't have a great sense of self-worth in terms of their ability to perform, but nonetheless finds, relatively natural to connect with people and has successful relationships. So I would assert that every human being arrives with their set limitations. Then the nurture part is we will attract the circumstances, the parents, the teachers, the lovers, the jobs that are what I call sort of the equivalent to epigenetics that will then trigger the code that we arrive with. Why does that happen, Peter? Well, so that we can actually reconcile it and play the game that I assert we're here to play, which is to break free of the constraints that we arrived with. So,
That's interesting. That's interesting. Because so
yeah.
so for me, if I, I've done a lot of reflecting on my story,
Yes.
and through my story, being able to go, okay, because of this and this and that, that's where the belief that, or my insecurity, was born. Um,
Correct.
but I like your way of looking at it though is actually no, the insecurity is there and brings the circumstances to trigger it essentially,
Correct.
which actually I
Yeah.
really like because it's it's that being in flow with life. We are life, and being in flow with life makes
Yeah, and
sense.
it to me just it's my want. It's how I do my thing, and I think it's why millions of people are like really resonating with my language. Is that it's going to a deeper level. It's not the presumed. Oh well, that guy has anger issues because his dad was an arsehole, excuse my French. But, it's like, that's why he's got problems. Now, I'm not saying that it was like fun to be raised by a man like that, or whatever that child had to witness. And sometimes, God forbid, parents do hit their children, and, there's all sorts of horrific things that go on to children. So in a traditional psychologist's office, the psychologist might talk about the experiences of a childhood. And then what happens is it's easy to go into a blame narrative that I am the way I am because of my parents. Now, that I find to be very disempowering, because you're still a victim of circumstance. So then I'm talking to a 40, 50-year-old executive who's commanding good money, who's got his own or her own spouse with their own children. And it's very subtle. And this is why I love the work that I do, because it really is these fine lines. But they could have all the trappings of life, but they're still stuck in a victim mindset, because they're under the impression that everything that they were dealing with was because of something. What I'm doing is I'm bringing 100% responsibility to the being. That everything, like even for myself, people might think I'm mad if they haven't already come to that assumption. I don't know. But, I would say that my soul, in ways that I don't comprehend, it's an unconscious process, nonetheless orchestrated, as did the souls of my mum and dad, in terms of a co-creation of all of our existences, the passing of my parents. Now, as a child, I certainly didn't want that, and it wasn't a conscious process. But I can see, in terms of the evolution of who I've become, if I was now, who I am at my age, and my dad was still alive, obviously he'd be quite old, but I would never have become the person I am today, because I admired, I loved, and almost obsessed about who my dad was, to the point, like a lot of children, that I would have become who I thought he would have wanted me to become, which would then, I'd still be stuck in the auspices of a parent's dream versus my own. So again, even in my own personal subjective experience, the arc of my own journey, I could assert that the events, albeit seeming very devastating, were nonetheless orchestrated. And again, this isn't conscious. This is just, we're talking at a different dimension here. But they were orchestrated such that I could become who I'm destined to become. And when you understand that, one, it's empowering, because you have a say in it, even if it's not like a verbal say. And two, it eradicates the idea that anyone's a victim. So it gets rid of any need for blame or shame. It's like, no, I might not understand how exactly the circumstances of my life have come together, but nonetheless, in a way, I am asking for life to present me with this opportunity for some form of growth and insight to occur. And I think that's just a much more powerful conversation.